my speech on abolishing the death penalty. Do you think it's okay to kill people who kill people to show that killing people isn't okay? I don't believe so, and neither does the growing number of advocates. Quote, today there is a growing enlightenment in the world community regarding the value of capital punishment. A majority of public executions take place in only 7 countries: Iran, Iraq, China, North Korea, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and the United States of America. Quote, abolish the death penalty, invest in public safety. This speech is to persuade you that the death penalty is incompatible with our values, and throughout my speech, I will inform you of an alternative method. The death penalty, also known as capital punishment, is a state-sanctioned practice of killing a person as a form of punishment for a crime. There are 4 types of capital punishment: hanging, firing squad, lethal injection, and electrocution. There are three major theories of punishment, and those are the deterrence, the retributive, and the rehabilitative. First, I'll be talking about the deterrence. The death penalty was implemented to create fear and to scare people into not doing bad things. Although that could be a good idea, has it really worked? Quote, the death penalty does not advance public safety. It has proven countless times to be an ineffective deterrent to violent crime. In fact, the average homicide rate in states with the death penalty is 4.4 per 100,000 people, and in states without the death penalty, it is 3.4 per 100,000 people. Quote, abolish the death penalty, invest in public safety. The U.S. was not founded on fear or revenge, but rather on justice, freedom, and the belief in dignity in all humanity. Next, I'm talking about retribution, and it's best quoted by, quote, Immanuel Kant, who famously argued that he who kills must be killed in return. And he also felt that the categorical imperative that he who kills must die. Quote, Flanders 606. The opposing side believes you should get the punishment deserved for the crime you did, not a punishment to be an example to others. Retribution is a hard topic, though, because it is subjective, as someone here could think a robbery deserves 5 years, someone thinks it's 10, and someone thinks they deserve a mental institution. Lastly, I have rehabilitation, and I find this option to be the best if we were willing to put the time, effort, and investments into it. Rehab is a set of interventions that optimizes function and minimizes disability. Martin O'Malley ran for mayor in Baltimore in 1999, and in Baltimore, the city was the most violent and addicted in America at the time, but with efforts, he drove the crime rate down 42%. Quote, there are very few avowed rehabilitationists out there. It does not work because we are not willing to invest in resources or power. Quote, Flanders 612. Now I'm going to talk about cons. The first con is the cost. Quote, the death penalty is also costly and ineffective in governance sentencing. Sentencing a prisoner to death costs $400,000 more than sentencing one to life in prison. Given that 56 people have been sentenced to death in Maryland since 1978, our state has spent about $22.4 million more than sentencing them to life in prison without parole. Quote, abolish the death penalty and advance in public safety. This money could be spent better than executing people. We could use it to help people, rehabilitate them, put them in mental institutions. Circumstances vary, and there are people who don't deserve a life outside of prison, but instead of killing them, we could get them help for life in solitude. The death penalty is also immoral and inconsistent. 70% of the world has abolished the death penalty, yet the United States is still divided. Advocates for the death penalty argue it's rooted in our traditions, but just like our notations on equality and liberty, it might be time for a change. It's inconsistent with our morals, and we must be above the temptation of revenge. The death penalty is not just or fair because of racial discrepancies as well. Quote, "It is impossible to find a time in American history when the use of the death penalty was not racially inflected. Even in the 17th century, in which the overall rate of blacks still far exceeded the whites on per capita basis." Quote, Steaker 24. Although African Americans only make up 13% of the population, 55% are waiting on death row right now to be executed, and 43% have been executed in the past. Although we have grown as a society, our justice system is still embedded with our history. And my last point is the innocence. So there have been 20 cases with strong evidence of innocence since 1989. One of the most recent being Walter Barton in 2020. And this is his story. So he was convicted in 1993 for fatally stabbing an old lady, an 81-year-old woman, and he came across the body with his granddaughter and a neighbor. Quote, "His conviction rested on a junk science testimony that small bloodstains on his clothes had been impact stains from high-velocity blood splatters. A 2015 analysis concluded the stains were transfer stains, and since she was stabbed 50 times, the perpetrator had to be covered in the blood." And the victim's granddaughter had stated multiple times that he had pulled her off of him, which is how he got blood on him. But still, he was executed on May 19th of 2020. And lastly, I will be talking about George Sidney Jr. He was the youngest boy ever executed in the United States. At the age of 14, George Sidney Jr. was executed for executing 2 white girls in the Deep South. He was only 14 at the time, and the only testimony was that he was a witness, or he was seen with them. And Sidney was put into an oversized electric chair, and the oversized helmet fell off after only the first shock. Quote, "On December 17th, 2014, South Carolina Judge Carmen Mullen exonerated the 1944 conviction at request for the remaining family members." Quote, Ulmer 324. After 70 years, George Sidney Jr. was finally proven innocent. He only weighed 95 pounds at the time, and he could not hold, let alone swing, the murder weapon. So, yeah, he was proven innocent. But in my persuasive speech, I told you why the death penalty should be abolished and what should be implemented instead, which is life in prison without parole. Most people believe only the most heinous people end up on death row, but that is clearly not the case. Is it worth risking innocent lives to prove a point that statistically cannot be made? Thank you for listening to my speech.